Hi again guys, and welcome to another review for a returning face from the past of Gran Turismo in the 1.11 patch, the Viper GTS, a car which has, as I said, made a return, but not only that, it's one of the longest standing performance cars of the entire franchise. It stretches way back to the PS1 days, and it's always been a very capable, very fast car. Not necessarily always easy to drive, of course, but fast nonetheless. And on GT Sport, I have to say that this car did surprise me by how well it handles. Now, it's not a perfect handling car, of course not even close in fact, but it was easier to drive this, even in its fully tuned form with sports tyres, which is what you can see in this video, level 5 weight, level 5 power, than it was to drive the Supra with those same tuning levels. That surprised me. I didn't expect the Viper to handle better basically than a Supra. I would have never assumed that that would be the case, but it was, at least for me, of course, with my tuning. Now, the Viper is nowhere near as fast as it used to be in the world of Gran Turismo, because even in this video you can see it'll get up around 220-ish, but even the power is so drastically dropped compared to what it was, for instance, on Gran Turismo 6. This car's putting out over 1100 horsepower on Gran Turismo 6, even in the non-premium form. You're looking at huge power. Now you're looking at Ford GT power, but not Ford GT power from GT6, Ford GT from GT Sport, which is around 830 horsepower. Now that's not bad, but it's no way near what a Viper should be putting out, and it's kind of strange that they've done that to it, given that the Hellcat, for instance, can still put out around 1000. Now, of course, with the Hellcat you have more to begin with, but it does just go to show the innate fault, I would say, in the current tuning and specifically the upgrade system which we have in the game, because for weight it's not too bad. Dropping the weight, increasing the weight, that works pretty well, but the power, it's just not really that accurate, because a fully tuned Viper should not be putting out less power than a fully tuned Hellcat. That's just not how it should work. But that's the way it is at the moment. And due to the fact that the game is less biased toward top-end speed, straight-line speed in general, that's probably not going to change anytime soon. However, what the Viper does offer is a surprisingly, not necessarily beginner-friendly package, but in its fully tuned form, it is surprisingly capable. I'll say that. That's about as close to beginner-friendly as I'll say, because it's not beginner-friendly. You can certainly slide around all over the place if you don't keep the car in check, and even in this video you can see me make a couple of mistakes, given that this was essentially the first time I've ever driven it in the game. But at the same time, given that it's the first time I drove it on the game in its fully tuned form with just a quick tune setup slapped on there, it goes to show the innate potential which it does have. Now, the Viper has always had that potential, especially in racing form, but in road forms as well. It's always been a great value car as well on Gran Turismo. 90 grand is still the price, just like the premium version on Gran Turismo 6 was, and it retains much of that car's raw ability in its lower state of tune or in stock form, but it's more the higher levels that you notice the difference. Because at the end of the day, a 200-300 horsepower deficit is always going to be noticeable, especially when on that game this was like a 295 mile per hour car, whereas now it struggles to pass 220, at least on this track. And of course, if we had Lasat without the chicanes, it could potentially be a different scenario. But that's not necessarily unrealistic. So again, as I've said before, it's not necessarily a bad thing that certain cars have slowed down, as long as it is a mutual thing. If it's across the board, that all of the cars are more realistic, and for the most part that is the case. But it does still feel weird to have a Viper that's just no way near as quick or as dominant in a straight line as it used to be. Now, some people I think will probably like that, because it makes it feel a little bit less OP, as for instance a drag car, like is what it usually is. But at the same time, for those who are super fans of the Viper, you might be disappointed in its fully tuned form. Now, in lower states of tune, I don't think you will be disappointed, because it's actually really good. Plus, the fact that you can drop the power by quite a bit does make it potentially useful. But apart from that, it just feels like you've got the same essential car, in a way, Obviously, it sounds a little bit better, looks a little bit better, the physics are a little bit more authentic to real life, but it feels like the car has almost been capped. Like the top-end potential, and I don't mean top speed, I mean just top-end tuning potential, has been pared back a little bit. That's unfortunate, because one of the pleasures of having a Viper was always getting stupid numbers out of it, not just for speed, but for sheer power and torque as well. And when cars like the Skyline and the Supra are still putting out similar numbers to what they used to have, whereas stuff like the GT from Ford and the Viper from Dodge have been pared back by quite a lot, that does seem a little bit unfair. That's always been the case. Japanese cars have always been favoured, but not necessarily that blatantly. So that's kind of unfortunate. At the same time though, one thing I will say that I've noticed having driven the Hellcat, the Viper GT3R, and now this one in particular, all three of those so far have in common one thing that I am actually impressed by. And it actually touches on a point that I mentioned earlier, that the Viper surprised me by how easy it was to actually drive. It's very smooth, it's surprisingly restrained, which the Viper is not in real life, even in stock form. And it actually makes me think that the approach that Polyphony have taken to the Dodge vehicles in this game almost feels like they're treating them with more respect. Because the Viper GT3R is surprisingly good, surprisingly beginner-friendly. The Hellcat is shockingly beginner-friendly, in fact, for a car with so much power and so much weight. And it still continues to surprise me how quick the Hellcat is compared to many other cars that I've tuned up around this track in particular. And it's about more than just straight line speed, of course, because that alone will not give you a best lap here, and yet the Hellcat continues to be one of the quickest road cars here. And also now with the Viper, it's not easy to drive, but it's a lot easier to drive than I expected it to be, especially for a car with so much power going through sports soft tyres, with traction control off to boot. But if you do decide to use the car, I don't think you'll be disappointed by it, as long as you're not buying it for its top-end tuning potential, as I mentioned just now. So for Viper fans, I think you might have mixed feelings on it, because as I said, one of the most fun parts of having a Viper was knowing that you've got that stupid potential if you want it, whereas now, that's kind of gone. It's fast, but it's not stupid fast anymore. So take that as you will. It's good in a way, but it's also kind of disappointing in a way. But that's it overall for this particular review. Of course, stick around on the channel to see more reviews and tuning for new cars as they're added to the game. And of course, for now, as always, thanks for watching.